Okay, we are ready now.
Hello everyone, welcome to Indo-Indians Gandhi Jayanthi celebration today. And we have with us 10 amazing people, in fact 9 amazing people who are great storytellers and who will be sharing their inspiring stories from Gandhiji's life. There are so many quotations and so many stories that we learned. It's his legacy, Gandhiji's legacy, that he's left for all of us. It is a national holiday today in India, and today also happens to be the Batik Day in Indonesia. And so it's a double celebration, which is why all of us are in Batik or in Khadi, which is Gandhiji's favorite fabric. Gandhiji was also fondly called Bapu, or the father of the nation. And we will, each of us will share what has inspired us from Gandhiji's life. And we have Amol Titus. Hi Amol, welcome.
Hi.
Amol will be our first speaker and he will also be introducing this session to you.
Okay, thank you, Poonam. So happy Gandhi Jayanti to everybody, and also happy Batik Day. And you know, I'm wearing khadi and batik. Both of these are very traditional, rural, homespun, cottage industry art forms. And I think there is a message in the way both these art forms, in a way, they are struggling today in the onset of a lot of dumping and the destruction of artisans. So I would like us all to support these art forms, because otherwise, as Gandhiji said, there is no future if we do not protect what happens in our villages.
Right.
So I will begin with a quotation. It says, it is said that it takes one great man to recognize another great man. When the year 2000 was celebrated, Time magazine had all the great people of the last century. Gandhiji was number 2 and number 1 was Einstein. So what did number 1 say about number 2? So I quote, Albert Einstein wrote, Gandhi had demonstrated that a powerful human following can be assembled not only through the cunning game of the usual political maneuvers and trickeries, but through the cogent example of a morally superior conduct of life. In our time of utter moral decadence, he was the only statesman to stand for a higher human principle and relationship in the political sphere. So I think that is a great tribute from Einstein. So I'm going to talk today about the Dandi Salt March, and I've selected this story because it encompasses many great aspects of Gandhiji. We have all heard of the Salt March, seen pictures about it, photographs. It's a very iconic moment in Gandhi's life. Let's understand the context of this Salt March. In October 1929, the US stock market had crashed. England, Europe, the whole of the Western world was getting very polarized, because remember, this is the time when Hitler is becoming more and more powerful in Germany. So the economic situation was very volatile, a bit like today. And the first response of the British was to increase the taxes, increase the flood of imports. So they were dumping a lot of their products into India. In October 1929, Viceroy Irwin announced that the British would start some kind of discussions on a dominion status. So they would start looking at some kind of allocation of certain rights and privileges to the Indian people. So Gandhi met immediately, he met Irwin on 23rd December 1929 and said, whatever you're talking of this dominion status, it must include a right of Swarajya, which means full independence, right to secede from the British Empire. And then the Congress party said, yes, we leave it to you. They passed a resolution and said, we should have a civil disobedience movement, but we will wait for the signal from Gandhi. So 1930, in January, Tagore meets Gandhi and asks him, what's your plan? So Gandhi says, I don't have a plan right now, I'm thinking about it. So January and February, he spends time thinking. what should be my signal? On 2nd March, he sends a letter to Irwin saying, we are going to commence civil disobedience. Number one, colonial system is crushing the life of peasants. Number two, the salt tax. So the British are imposing a salt tax. Indians cannot even make their own salt. And this salt tax is sapping the foundation of the health and morals of our peasants. And in this letter, he makes a very interesting point, which many people don't know. He writes that the British Prime Minister earns 90% the salary of the average British citizen. But the English Viceroy in India earns 5,000 times the salary of a peasant. So he makes it very clear that these kind of taxes and all are destroying the peasants, and therefore this disobedience movement will take place. So this is the signal. He gives the Britishers 9 days and says that I will start this civil disobedience movement on the 12th of March. So on the 12th of March, Gandhiji leaves Sabarmati Ashram for Dandi, which is on the coast, along with 78 colleagues. And at that point of time, Gandhi is 61 years old. He walks for 200 miles, and this is spread across 24 days. It electrifies the villages. People come, thousands gather, they throw rose petals, and Gandhi uses this very smartly because he stops. It's not a continuous walk. He stops at the villages, and he also shares some of his core messages to the people. For example, he tells them, please wear khadi, avoid alcohol and drugs, abandon child marriage, maintain cleanliness, and spiritually cleanse yourself. Apart from that, he starts talking about this salt tax and says, wait for my signal. On 5th April, he reaches Dandi along with his followers, and they have a prayer meeting in the evening. 6th morning, early morning at dawn, Gandhi goes to the coast, and there's that famous iconic image. He leans over, he picks up a few grains of salt and says, this is the signal for the nation, that we will make our own salt. We will not pay any kind of illegal tax on it. And if we cannot even make our own salt, what is this kind of living due for? And that is an electrical signal which goes right across. And this symbol of, it's a great example of communication. There is no Facebook, there is no Twitter, there is no microphone, there is no cameras, but through this signal right across the nation, and this is undivided India, people get the message of what Gandhiji is trying to say. Over the next 6 months, lots of similar protests are held everywhere. There's a famous one of Sarojini Naidu, who goes north of Bombay to the Dharasana salt works, and a lot of the volunteers get smashed by the Britishers. But the whole protest is peaceful, and this message goes right across from Bangladesh, or what is today Bangladesh, to what is today Pakistan, north to south, that this is what the Indians have to do, and they have to resist peacefully, non-violently, but make it known to the Britishers that they have no moral authority to rule over India. So this is the story of Dandi. I think it is a turning point, a pivotal point, and it has a lot of relevance in today's world, in the societies in which we live, in terms of how we communicate with the people, how leaders become mass leaders, how they have the moral courage when they face injustice, and at the same time, how to create unity behind a great cause. So I will stop over there and pass it on to the next speaker. So Poonam, who's our next speaker?
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
My name is Geeta, and I'm the proud daughter of India. Being the daughter of Nation of Father gives me the biggest pride ever. And I would like to greet you all in his way. So that is Namaste. Thank you so much for today. Also, I'm really happy to share the Batik Day with Gandhi Jayanti, another pride for us. Well, Gandhiji has really inspired we Indians and all over the world extremely deeply. Coming to a small incidents of his life, which I can relate to myself also, I would like to share with you. When Gandhiji was a small boy, so he was an extremely scared boy. He used to all the time think of ghosts whenever it was dark. So from going to another room also, he would think that if I go out of the room, there'll be ghosts around me and somebody will catch me, and he would have a great imagination, which was of course not real. So one night when there was no light, he was just wanting to go from one room to another, and he was very scared as usual. Well, I'm also very scared. That's how I relate myself here, and I get the courage. So his maid servant named Rambha, she said, what's the problem, son? Why are you not going to the other room? He said, I get very scared of ghosts, and I cannot. There and then she told him, now, whenever you think of a ghost, think of Lord Rama. Whatever you're imagining about the ghost, think of Lord Rama at the same time, and you will never feel scared, and you'll always feel God Ram is with you. At the same time, he just got really impressed with her words. And after that, he imagined Rama, and he could march the whole life alone, to the extent that this maid servant had the impact that when he died, his last words were, Hey Ram. They started with Rambha, the maid servant. Another very small incident which inspired me was then when children were playing one day, and Gandhi was already an active person in the politics. So when the small boy went to see him, he was very upset seeing that, look at this man is called, I mean, he has such a big name and still he does not have clothes to wear. He's not wearing anything except a small cloth all over his legs. So he just went to Gandhiji and he said, hey Gandhi, he would call him Gandhi, you don't have a shirt to wear? Gandhi said, no. He said, okay, my mother does good sewing. So what I'll do, I'll tell my mother, I'll get a nice shirt for you. He said, son, but I'm not alone. So he said, okay, it's fine. I'll get you 2, 3, 4, 5. Tell me how many. My mother will do it for you. He said, son, the population of India is 40 lakhs. All my 40 lakhs people, all my brothers and sisters are without clothes. How can I wear clothes? This really inspired me, and I realized what a simple and truthful man Gandhi was. He did not wear a shirt, but he had the greatest impact on everyone, to the extent that till date, I'm extremely proud of India because nation's father is Mahatma Gandhi. Proud to be an Indian. Thank you so much. Namaste again.
I think this is my turn. Actually, I didn't prepare a story, but it is the reflection of the quote that I got. It is the quality of our work which pleases God and not the quantity. To me, this quote implies that God wants us to work wholeheartedly to be the best we can be. It is useless if people see us busy with so many things to do, but the results are only average because we don't do our best. Sometimes we just want people to see us everywhere, involved in so many activities, and hang out with celebrities or VIPs. But what do we get in the end? Has our work made good impact in people's life, or is it only for our own good? It's okay if we own some businesses or do many different things at the same time. But let's evaluate our work and ourselves. When we work as if we are working for God, no matter the type of work we do, we will begin to feel a sense of fulfillment. We will put our best foot forward and strive for excellence, because now God is our focal point and reason for working. Perhaps there have been times we have worked on something and felt overworked, unappreciated, overlooked, and unnoticed by other people. But please remember that our work is done as a service to the Lord. Once again, I will read what Gandhi said. It is the quality of our work which pleases God, and not the quantity. I hope this can improve our attitude about work. And please remember that we've been blessed to be a blessing.
Thanks, Grace. Grace, could you also take a minute to introduce yourself?
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is the first time for me to join Indo-Indians event. My name is Grace Sabandar. What should I introduce?
Just introduce yourself very briefly.
Okay. Yeah. I'm the founder of Ambassador and CEO Club, and also the CEO of Global Business Services. So I met Poonam and everyone from British Professional Women's Group. At that time, I was invited by Sony to be the speaker. And then from there, I started knowing more about India, actually. Yeah.
Thanks, Grace. That's lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'd like to move on to Julia. Julia, hi. Julia Suryakusuma. We spoke to her recently some time ago, and it would be lovely to have her views on Gandhiji and what has inspired her. Julia, you're on mute.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
It's on mute again. Yeah.
So can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I have to get rid of this. Okay. Can you see? All right. Okay. Do I need to introduce myself? But there was a long profile of me recently.
Yeah. So I just said that.
Yes. Okay.
Kusuma, we just met her recently.
Anyway, I think that this today reintroducing Gandhi on his birthday is very timely indeed, and really a breath of fresh air after, if any of you have had any chance, even a glimpse to look at the president elections in the US. So I think that we really need to introduce the idea of non-violence into the world and to our world leaders. So that's why I'm really pleased to that I'm doing this program. The quotes that I chose are two. The first is, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And the second is, love is the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable. So, well, the reason I chose these two quotes is because they can be applied to both individuals and communities and nations. And of course, everybody knows I'm a feminist, and the personal is political. So happiness is not something that is derived from externalities like having material things, having a new dress or having a new car or something, but it's the most essential kind of happiness is derived from within, and it's to do with the convergence of the values that you espouse with the way that you live. Now, how many people can really say that as Gandhi did, that that basically it's about walking the talk, and Gandhi said that my life is my message. How many of us can say that? That means that his values are, he lives out his values. He walks the talk. So we get values from everywhere, from all over, first from the family, and then from religion, from school, society, the state, but actually the most important, the most meaningful, significant source of values is your own conscience. And how many of us actually consistently live by our conscience? So as I said earlier, Gandhi is most famous for his satyagraha, a principle of nonviolence, which was his way of attaining, attaining essential human value, which is freedom. So what is a human being without freedom? So of course we know that he used nonviolence. He's the, his first act of nonviolent civil obedience was 127 years ago, when he was thrown out of the first class train compartment because it was meant for whites only. So he's called the father of the nation because he was the chief architect of the independence struggle, which he fought in the values of nonviolence. I'm not sure whether it was he who said this or somebody else, but I heard recently somebody said that peace is a natural state. So the natural state of human beings is peace. Violence, you have to do something. If there were no human beings in the world, then we would have peace. So, as I said, nonviolence is badly needed in today's world, which is now ruled by Trump and other Trump-like figures, who is the opposite of Gandhi. But it's not just the people; it's also us. I mean, it's not just the leaders; it's also us. It's individuals, because when leaders talk about violence or inciting violence, then that is what happens.
Right.
It's been proven. It's been proven. So we have to wonder why. I mean, Trump must be a really unhappy guy. I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, Julia, thank you. I think we should just stick to Gandhi today. And, I thank you for sharing your thoughts about non-violence and Gandhiji. Thank you.
Can I say something about the love, just very briefly, because I think it's really important. Love is, we live in a world dominated by fear. And love is actually about inclusivity, empathy, social solidarity, universal human values, and internationalism. Now we live in a very ego-centered, narrow, nationalistic way, which, and actually all the problems of the world now are international in nature, like climate change, the pandemic, gender equality, human rights. So that's what I mean about love. I don't mean it in a romantic way, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julia. Much appreciated. We'd like to move on to Rita Srivastava. She's a green thinker here in Indonesia. Hi.
Hi, Poonam. Thank you for having me. My name is Rita Srivastava, and I live, breathe, think, act, try to act in as green a way as possible, and also try to communicate these thoughts to friends, neighbors, whoever is willing to lend an ear, and to show them the value of green living. And ahimsa, I think I think you could definitely say ahimsa is a green value. And it has been a greatly admired value in Hindu, Buddhism, and Jain culture. But the beauty about Gandhi was that he changed ahimsa from a very passive act to an active action. It's not just enough to say that ahimsa is the absence of violence. It's much more than that. It's that you may not harm anybody, you may not offend anybody, you may not harbor uncharitable thoughts towards anybody, even if that person is your enemy. In fact, in the true thinking of ahimsa, nobody is your enemy because everybody is an identical person like you. They have the same thoughts, the same feelings. So they should be treated with the same love and respect. Whether it's a lower caste person, whether it's an Englishman, it doesn't matter. They all have their own dignity, they all have their own respect, and we have to value that. And I think that is the basic tenet of ahimsa or non-violence. And I read that, I hope this is true, that it was his wife who actually taught him the value of non-violence. Because mind you, we are talking about the early 20th century, in which day and time it was considered that the wife was the property of the husband and would obey the husband and would do whatever the husband wanted her to do. But Kasturba, Gandhiji's wife, was quite a strong-minded person, and I don't think she was very happy with what Gandhiji asked her to do, but she couldn't protest openly, but she made it very clear to him that she would submit to him, but only because she was being forced to do so, not because she wanted to do so. And I think over time it became very clear to Gandhiji that he was wrong in trying to impose his will on her. And there were a lot of things which he made her do, which later he himself realized were not very smart things. And he himself has acknowledged that she was my first teacher of non-violence, because she was the one who made him understand. Of course, later on, he moved to India, and the most spectacular use of, or the first use of non-violence which Gandhi did was in the Champaran movement in 1917. I would like to highlight that because the history books say that that was the first place where non-violence was successfully used by Gandhi in a national context. Champaran is a small district in Bihar, and it's primarily farmers. And the farmers there were told that they had to grow half of their land that they owned had to be used for growing indigo, which was a crop used for, it was called neel in Hindi. And it gives I think the roots of the plant or the leaves of the plant give a blue color. And that blue color was very prized by the English for dyeing their textiles. So all farmers were told that half their land had to be used for growing indigo. And the indigo was bought by the British at a price which was fixed by the British, which had nothing to do with what the cost of the plant was. And not only that, the farmers then had to use half their land for growing a crop which was of no use to them. They couldn't grow rice, they couldn't grow any food on it. They had to grow a crop which was of no use to them. And they started protesting violently. And the moment you protest violently, it will be put down violently. So there was no outcome coming out of this until Gandhiji was told about it. And he actually came to Champaran in 1917. And of course, the moment he landed in Champaran, the British wanted to arrest him. So he said, okay, you can arrest me, but that doesn't mean that what I have come here for is going to change. I will still, even from jail, I will be talking to people and I will be trying to show the people and show you that what you're doing is unjust. And after prolonged discussions with the British, then they realized that if they put him in jail, it would become even a bigger crisis. So they decided not to jail him. And immediately he started walking from village to village in Champaran, talking to the farmers. And he actually compiled huge records of how much land was being cultivated for indigo and how much money the farmers were losing. And he presented all this to the data to the British. And then initially the British conceded and said, okay, instead of half the land, only 3/10 of a farmer's land can be used for growing indigo, not half. And the farmers were very happy about it, but Gandhiji still persisted and said that actually, no, they should not be growing this crop at all. It is of no use to them. It is only benefiting the British. And after prolonged discussions and movements where the farmers, like the Dandi March, but 20 years before, the farmers with Gandhiji, walked from village to village talking about their problems, and ultimately the British stopped forcing the cultivation of indigo. And the Champaran movement had such a electrifying effect all over India that you could actually confront the British without violence, without any kind of act of where they would be forced to react. I mean, this was a very strong action, but it was not violence. It was not, it kind of opened the eyes of everybody. And I think it was a great lesson. And I think even in today's world, what he tries to show is that ahimsa is not cowardice. It is wisdom. It is wisdom that makes one strong enough to give up violence. And that is the beauty of ahimsa. That is the beauty of non-violence. And he actually said it cannot be preached. It has to be practiced. If we remain non-violent, hatred will die because there will be nothing for it to fight against. And he also said non-violence should be an inseparable part of our being. We cannot choose it when it suits us and forget it when it doesn't suit us. And I think in today's world, ahimsa is especially relevant. Conflict between man and nature has contributed to most of the problems that we are facing today. Whether it's coronavirus, whether it's forest fires, whether it's climate change. I think we have to live, we have to let live, and we have to live in harmony. And this is the message that Gandhi has given to us.
Thanks,
Thank
Rita.
you. I think this is my message. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Rita. Very valid, especially with ahimsa and non-violence. I think that's a very strong message indeed. Thank you. We now move on to Yanti Nisro. Hi, Yanti.
Hi, Poonam. Thank you for inviting me for this amazing group. So I choose a quote of Gandhi, which is really relevant for now even, you know, like we have so many leaders, you know, that somehow I think might forget about what is the good leaders are supposed to be. So that's why relevant. So Gandhi's quote on leadership says that a sign of a good leader is not how many followers you have, but how many leaders you create. And this is like now what somehow our leaders in the many countries, I can, you know, I don't need to mention whoever, but just like, I think we need this to be reminded again, what is leadership? And that's why I'm really like to sharing about this. And Amol mentioned how even Albert Einstein's affected or inspired by Gandhi. So I want to mention here some great leaders that really inspired by Gandhi. So how great Gandhi is, like not only inspired the Indian, but also people from all over the world, and especially many of great leaders really inspired by Gandhi. Just to mention some, for example, Barack Obama. So there's one interview he's asked about who's, you know, like the wish list of to have dinner with, and he just without hesitation said Gandhi. That's how, you know, important Gandhi, you know, inspired Obama. Another one is Martin Luther King. So he really inspired by Gandhi on his freedom movement. And also Steve Jobs. You know, like probably some people don't know how Steve Jobs is really inspired by Gandhi. And how Gandhi inspired not only the political leaders, businessmen, but also, you know, from spiritual, because he is really a political and spiritual leader. So that's why like Dalai Lama also inspired by him. Even Dalai Lama is very proud to say that I am Gandhi's follower. Mm-hmm. And he says that Gandhi was a great human being with a deep understanding of human nature. So his life inspired Dalai Lama so much. Another great leader that really inspired by Gandhi and then affected and make transformation of a country is Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela says that Gandhi's idea have played a vital role in South Africa's transformation. So with the help of Gandhi's teaching, apartheid has been overcome. So that how powerful one person can make difference to even other countries, really making a goosebump. And we really need now leaders like him in this era. Yeah. So like, that's why I'm so, even now I have goosebumps. So like how inspired, at least for myself, if not for all of us. And not only that, so there's another famous person that really inspired by Gandhi is John Lennon. So he says that his music inspired by Gandhi. Not only his music, he also followed his nonviolence protests during Vietnam War at that time. So this is just to mention how Gandhi already touched, already inspired people, leaders, and then make them becoming great leaders as well. So why is that? Because Gandhi is a leader that can set and living the example of what you want people to follow. So really walk the talk. So as Julia mentioned earlier, that his life is his message.
Right.
So I want to end my sharing is there is one story of Gandhi when at that time a woman with her son, traveled for 2 weeks to meet Gandhi in the village. So when they met, she asked Gandhi, so please advise my son to stop eating sugar. So for whatever reason, the son has problem. And Gandhi says, okay, please come back again in another 2 weeks. And since the woman's already traveled so far, so she stayed with the son in that village for another 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, and then they met again with Gandhi. So Gandhi just said to the son, okay, son, please stop eating sugar. So the woman, the mother, was so puzzled, like, what's going on? Why it takes 2 weeks for you to say that? And Gandhi said, yeah, because 2 weeks ago, I still eat sugar. That is the beautiful of walk the talks, leading, setting the example. I think that's all of my sharing. Thank you, Poonam.
Thank you, Yanti. That was a really nice story on how to, to practice what you preach.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we'd like to move on to Rita Thakur. Rita, hi, Rita.
Hi, Poonam. Thank you so much for this beautiful, fabulous, thoughtful event. Really appreciate it. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Rita Thakur and I manage the Sadhu Vaswani Center, Jakarta. So let me begin. The tide of time moves on. Generations come and generations go. Kingdoms rise to power and kingdoms are vanquished. Civilizations are born and civilizations are wiped out. Friends, what remains forever is the eternal virtues of love, compassion, kindness, humility, selflessness. Today, friends, my very dear friends, we all got together here. We all are getting together here to pay homage to our dear Mahatma Gandhi. His life glowed in the radiance of humility, simplicity, and selflessness. In the words of Ralph Emerson, he says, "A great man is always willing to be small. So is the case of Mahatma Gandhi. His greatness shone only in his being little. Let me narrate to you a very short incident in the life of Mahatma Gandhi of his being little. Way back in 1909, at London, Mahatma Gandhi was invited to be the chief guest at a function that was to be followed by a banquet gala dinner. He very kindly accepted the invitation to be the chief guest, yes, but on a condition that the dinner that was planned for all the guests would be a complete Indian vegetarian dinner. Now, on those days, during those days at London, there were no hotels that would serve Indian vegetarian dinners. Now, to fulfill this, the volunteers, the organizers gathered together, they rent a hall and then bought all the provisions, and also got a host of volunteers to help in cooking and chopping. As the volunteers were tirelessly working, suddenly a small, thin man with wiry spectacles and a very pleasant looking man joined them in the work, and he was making himself so useful to everybody there that all the volunteers were just too happy in assigning him with more and more duties. And this tiny framed man continued to work. As evening approached, one of the main organizers stepped into the hall, and his eyes fell upon this small statured man. And he kind of recognized him and said, "Hey, this is Gandhi. What is he doing here? Working amidst you volunteers? Is he not supposed to be this evening's chief guest?" The volunteers were baffled and shocked, and immediately dissuaded him from doing any further work. But as humble as our dear Gandhiji is made, he continued well. He continued to work well on to the evening. And can you believe, he even helped them to lay the tables and the plates up to the evening. After which, he very comfortably, very humbly moved on to the auditorium to do his role, to play his role as the chief guest.
Very nice, Rita.
Friends, where can you see such a beautiful, such a humble man like Gandhiji? Like I said, his greatness shone in his littleness. His greatness glowed in his simplicity. Not for him were pomp and show. Thank you everybody.
Thank you, Rita. That was great. That was a story that I had not heard before. We'd like to move on now to Sachin. Hi, Sachin. Sachin Gopalan is an entrepreneur in Jakarta, and invited him. He's a great storyteller, and we invited him to share his favorite story inspired by Gandhiji's life.
Thank you, Poonam. Very happy to be here, and this is actually not really just only a story, but it's a story of the times. Because if you were to look at the circumstances by which Gandhiji, rose to fame and made his contribution to society and the humanity at large, I would say, was because of the British rule into India. The over 200 years, if you look at how the British actually came in and established their rule, and what was the after effects of that, that's where the story begins. So largely the British took over India in a very violent way. And every violent resistance came to a very ugly end, right? There was no real resolution of fighting the British the violent way, because they were more powerful, they had more guns, they had the Navy, they had technologically at that point, warfare was their domain. So the Indians were by and large a peaceful community, and little kingdoms all over the place did not really know how to come together. And of course, they did not understand the agenda of the British at that time. The British systematically decimated or broke down the industry and that was there in India, which was quite advanced at that time. India was very well known in all the products that it used to export and trade across the globe. All of that was systematically broken down and taken over by the British. And the British even at some point of time started selling their own goods. The British made goods had to be bought by Indians in a kind of circular economy that they were trying to set up. And a large part of the GDP of Britain was run by, India operations. As you would say, East India Company contributed a large part of it. So in all of this, when Gandhiji decided that, he should play a role in Indian politics and how he should approach it, being, the man of principles of non-violence, etc., he had many other ideas that were, trying to be connected into how he could play that role. So when he came in, you must not forget that at that time, 1939 onwards, the world was in World War II. And the British were also significantly weakened, and they had diverted all their, their military power to other parts of the world to fight the war. In fact, they had taken many Indian soldiers along with them as well. But there was an opportunity. And Gandhiji was able to bring about peaceful civil resistance as a tool, and combined it with this whole idea of national self-sufficiency. So what am I talking about today is that the story that we have learned from Gandhiji is about economic nationalism and how that has positives. Because, the world has gone a full circle. From the time when Gandhiji propagated this idea that you must buy Indian-made clothes, Indian-made goods, and not buy British-made products, and not take privileges that British offered, etc. It was strong economic nationalism which actually drove people, strong sense of patriotism, that they should not bow down to the economic incentives being laid out by the British. And well, cut a long story short, independence was won, and all the tactics worked, and the whole world at that time celebrated economic nationalism. That was the mantra. Then came, what we're seeing today. We have gone through a whole series of globalization tactics where the whole world opened up, trade reached new levels, and the competition for products became who could supply the cheapest product, or I wouldn't say cheapest in quality, but the lowest price product. And the final landed price became the most important thing. And this process actually decimated this entire economic nationalism that was created back in the 40s. People had to lose the, all the products. It killed the local producers, the local manufacturers, it killed the local farmers, and the world had to readjust to what we know as globalization. And short story to that is China. China was created out of that whole effort of becoming the factory of the world. And China had its own economic nationalism. It was how they can make products and sell it to the rest of the world and dominate world economy, which they did rather successfully. And in fact, if you look at it, things are coming back. And why is that? The pandemic today would not have happened in this way if the world did not have dependence on China for products. Because nobody was able to isolate China in the right time. They were not able to isolate them economically or politically. China fought back every effort which would have otherwise contained the virus within their borders. And now the virus is everywhere. And what has happened then? Finally, when the world is able to act, you cut off the supply chain and disrupted it so badly that countries came back into this economic nationalism of we can only buy local products because that's available. So the local economy started to bounce back and say, okay, let us make products which doesn't have to be transported in large distances, and we can start becoming more self-sufficient. So in all of this, the lesson learned here has become a full circle. And the lesson we've learned here is national self-sufficiency is actually important. The balance of it is what needs to be reworked, because so is globalization, so is international trade. They're also important. But what's the balance that we need so that every nation would not have this kind of an economic fallout because of a pandemic? Because we don't know what kind of other pandemics may come. There may be other conditions. And world always moves from one state to another state. And Gandhiji's principles of economic nationalism is actually very relevant today as we look inwards into what are the things that we did not do for the last 70, 80 years. And what is it that we should provide as opportunity for the youth so that they can get local jobs, make local products, and create self-reliance within their little towns, their little village, their little provinces. So this story or this inspiration from what Gandhi went through is something that the world is now going all over again. So like, many other topics of non-violence and so many other leadership issues that may be there. But this economic nationalism is also a powerful tool, which we need to understand and need to assimilate. And I think the lessons from Gandhiji's actions are very, very inspiring to relook at. So that's a little bit of a story from my side.
Thanks, Sachin. That, yes, being self-reliant, not only as a nation, is definitely the path to go forward. Currently in this situation, definitely. Thank you, Sachin. Now we have Shireen. Shireen is an educator in Jakarta. She has some preschools and she is a very capable educator. Hi, Shireen. Please share with us what has inspired you from Gandhiji's life.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Like Poonam said, I'm a very passionate educator, and I do believe that the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. And thank you very much to everyone for sharing such beautiful inspiration. And of course, thank you for Indo-Indians for always creating these platforms for everyone to learn and to move on. Right. So one of the quotes, actually there are many quotes of Gandhiji that I have grown up with, because in India, when we went to school, we were just immersed in this Indian history. And so there are often so many quotes, but today I've had to choose just one or two, because, you know, when my kids were very young, they used to sometimes come to me and say, you know, she didn't invite me, so why should I invite her? Or, you know, my friend didn't give me this, it didn't share, so why should I give it to her? And when children are very young, I believe that they learn everything at a very young age. And as a mother, I feel that it's very important for us to build that moral compass for them. And the best way to do it when they're young is through social stories and quotes. And the first quote that used to come to my mind at that time was, "An eye for an eye, you know, just makes the whole world go blind," which actually just means what Gandhiji meant was revenge for revenge, or pain for pain, or hurt for hurt is going to do nothing but actually blind our entire humanity and make everyone full of pain, hurt, and revenge. So I wanted to explain this to my children, and the easiest way for me to explain it to them was by telling them, you know what? We are all stars. You are a star. And when I say star, all you have to do is stop, think, act, and review. Imagine, you know, you have this pause button over here, and all we have to do in our lives when someone says a hurtful word, when someone wants to fight against us, or someone really tries to harm us, is to actually look at that pause. Be a star. Just stop, think, act, and review. Because when you do that, you are not going to react, but you're going to respond. And that is what we need. We need to learn the ability to respond, or responsibility. And like many of you said, and I think even Julia said, what is our purpose? What is your purpose or my purpose? I think humanity has a common purpose, and that is to be peaceful and to be happy. And how do we do that? It starts with us. If we do not return kindness when someone is frowning at us, what are we doing? We are then just killing the entire world. And there's a very nice story which I've read, and many of you might have read. It's that Cockroach Story, which just explains in such a humorous manner how much damage can be done by reacting. And I just like to share it. So there was once this group of women who were formally dining, and there was a cockroach that just flew onto the woman's plate before she started eating, and she threw an absolute fit in the restaurant, and she didn't even think. She moved her hands away and broke the plates and created so much chaos that everyone around her felt these ripples of fear and ripples of anger. It just one reaction created a whole ripple of damage around. And that same flying cockroach, who was unaffected by this whole thing, just flew and sat on the coat of the waiter. And all the waiter did was he looked down and he took that cockroach and he threw it away. And there was absolutely no harm. So I use this story very often to tell my children that, you know, being reactive is not going to help us. Let's all learn to be responsible. And we're not born responsible. We learn this. So let's all be stars. And to everyone out there, I think it's a good day for us to remember that if someone frowns at you, return a smile. If someone's there trying to harm you, don't harm him back. Teach him something positive. Because if you stand there and make the change, then you will be the change you want to see in the world. And that's another thing that Gandhiji said. Be the change that you want to see in the world. So instead of saying, he is like that, why should I be like this? Let's be the change we want to see in the world. Because, dear friends, if we return pain for pain, and if we return hurt for hurt and revenge for revenge, we're just going to have this, an eye for an eye will make our whole world go blind. So thank you.
Thank you, Shireen. I think that's really inspiring. And it's all about being more responsible and being more responsible about how we react to any situation. I think that's a great learning. Thank you. I also wanted to share one of my learnings that I had when I went to Sabarmati Ashram 2-3 years ago. I met with a lot of people there that worked there. That's where Gandhiji spent a lot of his time. And when I was speaking to him, to the people there, and I asked them, what has inspired you? So there was this very old woman, she picked up a little stick and she drew in the sand. She drew in the sand, and she said that she drew a circle. She drew a circle in the sand, and she said that Gandhiji's best message was to be shunya. Shunya in Hindi means be the zero. And he says, why be the zero? He says, when you are nothing, then there's no room for ego. There is always room to allow God's work to happen through you. There is always room for you to learn more when you are at zero. So when you stop being full of yourself, being full of all the other ego, misconceptions or perceptions, that is the time where you have to grow. From zero, from nothing, you can be everything. So that was something that has always stayed with me. And maybe that is why we can all aspire to learn and grow. So, and I thank each one of you for sharing such wonderful stories. I think this has been a great storytelling session. And I'd like to invite Amol to, would you like to, say a small summary, maybe something that stood out for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very inspiring. I think all of us through dialogue, Gandhiji's life is about dialogue and sharing. And I think that's what we have done today. The first thing which stood out for me was that the men were completely, in a minority in this conversation. So, and I think many of you don't know, there's a very famous British psychologist who once met Gandhi. And he said that Gandhi is great because a lot of feminine qualities are very strong in him. So qualities of, a lot of the things we have talked about today, like empathy, sharing, kindness, which people have talked about, concern for the poor, sharing, simplicity. I think these are all important lessons which a lot of men should also imbibe, because, Julia hinted at it, a lot of the anger and frustration and all in this world is probably resulting from certain imbalanced men. One final point I'd like to make is that, I'm a professor at universities, apart from being a writer, an educationist, and a strategic advisor. And one of my little bit of a concern in Indonesia is that Gandhi's life and Gandhi's cases are not well known. The understanding of Gandhi is less. So I think those of us who know this subject, maybe Poonam, this is a hint, a request. Maybe we need to do some events, outreach events on Gandhi and other role models like him to the youth, so that they get some guidance during their formative years.
Sure, Amol. I think that's a great suggestion. And just to, to also bring to your notice that a lot of the participants here are from Indonesia. They lived here. And as Yanti mentioned, there's so many different world leaders and singers who have been, even Dalai Lama has also been inspired by Gandhiji's teachings. And like somebody also mentioned, that his life is his legacy. And how can each of us leave a legacy behind us so that our thoughts, our actions speak for themselves. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. This has been a wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you, each one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Poonam. That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you for the lovely opportunity. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.